Okay, we're going to continue on in Unit 4, and we're going to discuss how to name aldehydes and ketones. So hopefully the functional groups that we're going to learn how to name in Unit 4 have become more familiar to you so that you're able to write down what an aldehyde and ketone looks like from memory. Remember that aldehydes and ketones both contain a carbonyl group, and the carbonyl group is the C double bond O. So the carbonyl group is a C double bond O. So both an aldehyde and a ketone have that. An aldehyde has a C double bond O H, and then this is bonded to another carbon typically. So one interesting note about aldehydes is that aldehydes are always at the end of molecules. So you're never going to have an aldehyde in the center, and that is because of the hydrogen being connected to the carbonyl. Now a ketone, on the other hand, is a C double bond O, so carbonyl, sandwiched between two carbons. So a ketone is always in the middle. So keep that in mind. So both an aldehyde and ketone have carbonyl groups. So the carbonyl we'll see in a few other functional groups in Unit 4. Now, hopefully you've been working on the chart on page 20 of your blue book, and you've been filling out pages 1 and 2 of this packet. It will help you. So maybe this nomenclature won't be so foreign to you. Now, aldehydes, we're going to talk about how to name them first. So remember, an aldehyde is a C double bond O with an H coming off of it. So with IUPAC nomenclature, you add a suffix. It's the AL suffix, and you take off the E from your alkane. So with the examples that I've given, you remember that IUPAC, you always find the longest continuous chain of carbons, name that as the parent, and if you notice an aldehyde functional group, then you take off the E and add AL. So let me do this in red. So we have one carbon here. So the parent would be methane, but it has an aldehyde. So I'm not going to put the E, I'm just going to add AL. So this aldehyde is methanal. Now I have to be careful with clearly distinguishing your O's and your A's in Unit 4, because if you put something that doesn't look quite like an A, it could be mistaken for methanol. So methanol, well, OL, what functional group does that mean? Well, that means an alcohol. So methanol is a one-carbon alcohol. So methanol and methanal, even though their name is only different by one letter, they do have significantly different structures, especially when you talk about their reactivity, which we'll learn about a little later on. So make sure that your handwriting is very clear and neat. Okay, so the next example that I have for an IUPAC name, it's a 2-carbon aldehyde. So the longest continuous chain of carbons is 2, so it would be ethane, but it has an aldehyde, so it's ethanal. Now with aldehydes, the carbon that is the carbonyl is always number 1. So you don't have to say 1-methanal. So this is always number 1, because we know that aldehydes will be at the end of the molecule. Now, for common nomenclature on aldehydes, you're going to take your root name and then add aldehyde. So from your orange flashcards, you know that form and acet, these are 2 roots that are on your flashcards, and you probably think, I don't know what these are for, probably a mistake. No, it's not a mistake. They are used for common nomenclature. So form is the root for 1 carbon. A set is 2 carbons. So with common nomenclature for aldehydes, we're kind of restricted. We can name a 1 carbon, a 2 carbon, and then a benzene-based aldehyde, and that's it. So this 1 carbon aldehyde, to name it using common nomenclature, you would just say form and then add aldehyde. So formaldehyde. So you've probably heard of formaldehyde and preservation of bodies, corpses. So formalin is typically used. So that seems familiar to you. This next aldehyde is a 2 carbon aldehyde. So we're going to have acet plus aldehyde, acetaldehyde. The nice thing about the the nice thing about the organic units is that we're not grading you on how you pronounce these names. As long as you can spell them and we can read them, then you'll get full credit. So that's, of course, if they're correct. Now, another structure from your orange flashcards that's in the common section is this benzene with an aldehyde on it. This is called benzaldehyde. So make sure you're familiar with those orange flashcard structures. Now, with alcohols, we had diols. With aldehydes, you can also have dials, so that's 2 aldehydes being present. So with a dial, you're going to have aldehydes at the end of the molecule. So for instance, this could be a dial. Because the aldehydes are at the ends of the molecule, you don't have to say, give me numbers. You don't have to say 1,4-butanediol. You just can say butanediol. So this molecule is called butane. So you have the parent plus dial. So butanediol. So I'll put this. The diols are named according to this. Alkane plus dial. You don't need to put numbers. Now there are cases where you will have an aldehyde with an OH or SH present. And you'll actually have this with other carbonyl containing functional groups. So whenever you have a carbonyl containing functional group, so I'll put this carbonyl containing functional group plus OH or SH. You might think, well, how am I going to name this? I have to account for the aldehyde or the ketone or the carboxylic acid and the SH and the OH. I have to add thiol. If you look through all the rules for naming these, the OH and the SH add suffixes, and so do the carbonyl containing functional groups. So it's which suffix do I add? Does one take priority? Well, it turns out that the carbonyl containing functional group is the first priority. So you're going to have that suffix on the end of your parent. So suffix on parent. So OH and SH aren't going to take the parent. They're just going to be listed as substituents. So they will be what they were called on your blue flashcards for Unit 4. So OH in the presence of a carbonyl containing functional group will be called hydroxy. And SH in the presence of a carbonyl containing functional group will be called mercapto. So anytime you have OH or SH present with a carbonyl containing functional group, the OH or the SH is called the way we learned it in Unit 3. So and we'll see some examples of this if that doesn't completely make sense. Now I'm going to introduce ketone nomenclature now before we work on practice molecules, because many times students confuse aldehydes and ketones. And I want you to get into the habit of recognizing whether it's an aldehyde or a ketone and then naming it. So let's go to ketone nomenclature now. So remember, a ketone is a carbonyl sandwiched between two carbons. So the IUPAC nomenclature, you add 1 to the ending, get rid of the E on the alkane, and you need a number when 4 or more carbons are present. So remember that IUPAC, always find the longest continuous chain of carbons containing the carbonyl. So this would be the longest continuous chain of carbons. Let's see, we'd number it so that the carbonyl gets the lowest number, so that would be left to right. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's a 5-carbon parent, so pentane. Take off the E and add on. So P-E-N-T-A-N. You're getting ready to put the E, but you're adding "one" for the ketone. So it goes like that. So that's pentanone. Now you need to tell me where the carbonyl is. Where is this ketone? Well, it's on the second carbon, so it's 2-pentanone. Now, common nomenclature for ketones is very similar to ether nomenclature, common nomenclature. So cover up the functional group. So we're covering up the carbonyl, and then you're naming the alkyl groups on either side. So this would be methyl, and on this side 1, 2, 3, so it's a straight chain of 3, so it's propyl. So it would be alphabetical order. I'm going to erase this, so it's methyl space propyl. Doesn't look like propyl. Propyl ketone. And if you had 2 of the same alkyl groups on either side of that carbonyl, then it would be, say, with 2 methyl groups, dimethyl ketone. Now, just like with aldehydes, you can have 2 ketones, so a dione. So the IUPAC nomenclature for diones would be, since ketones can be in the middle of molecules, you have to put number. So number, alkane, dione. So 2, 4, 6. So it has 6 carbons. So no hydrogens on that one. So this is an example of a dione. Number it this way. This name would be 2,3-hexane dione. And again, like I mentioned earlier, anytime you have a carbonyl containing functional group, which a ketone is a carbonyl containing functional group, you call OH hydroxy and SH mercapto. Okay, so now we get to the practice problems. What I want you to do, so pages 12 and the top of page 13 have molecules that are either aldehydes or ketones. Remember on the exam that all these functional groups are going to be jumbled together. You're going to have alcohols, ketones, aldehydes, carboxylic acids, esters, amides, all on one page. So you need to get in the habit of recognizing different functional groups. So it seems most often that students confuse aldehydes and ketones. That's why I've jumbled them together. I want you to practice naming these together so that you're familiar with the difference between an aldehyde and a ketone. So before you even start naming these, I want you to hit pause and label which is an aldehyde and which is a ketone. Okay, so I have written either A for aldehyde or K for ketone. So reading the top structures left to right, first structure is aldehyde, second one is aldehyde, third one is ketone. The middle set of structures, aldehyde, and actually it's a dialdehyde. Middle one is ketone. one on the right is a ketone, so ketone, ketone. And then on the top of page 13, aldehyde, aldehyde, ketone. Remember that aldehydes are at the ends of molecules, ketones are at the center. So hopefully you labeled these correctly as aldehydes or ketones. Now I want you to go through and name them using IUPAC or common nomenclature. Again, if I don't have a line, there isn't a common name. So hit pause and work on naming those. So the first structure, the IUPAC name is methanal. The common name is formaldehyde. The second structure has an OH in the presence of an aldehyde, so OH will be called hydroxy. So it's 3-hydroxybutanol. The third structure, 3,4-dihydroxycyclohexanone. When you have a cycloalkanone, or a cycloketone, the ketone is always numbered 1. So always number 1. Okay, the next structure is a propane diol, or called propane diol, no common name. The middle structure, 1,5-dihydroxy 3,3-dimercapto-2-pentanone. The next one is cyclobutanone. Again, this is always number 1, so I don't have to say 1-cyclobutanone. And then on the top of page 13, 2,3-dihydroxypropanol, 5-methoxypentanol. So I threw in an ether on you guys. So remember that ethers are named with prefixes. So it's 5-methoxypentanol. And then the last structure is 2-cyano-3,4-dimethylcyclopentanone. So we've been talking about aldehydes and ketones, and they are carbonyl compounds. So it turns out that carbonyl compounds with 4 carbons or less are soluble in water. That's right. And so we'll see this in lab when we deal with aldehydes and ketones. So for now, I want you to do the homework problems that pertain to aldehydes and ketones. Look through your lab manual, and you'll see that lab number 13, organic functional groups, you can do a lot of that lab. Also, alcohols, you can work on the pre-lab for alcohols since you know how to name alcohols. And then lab 15 deals with aldehydes and ketones, and there's a very nice pre-lab that's a practice of what we just went over in this lecture. So practice, practice, practice. Work on your pink book. Work on page 20 of your blue book. The more you practice this, the easier it will become. All right. Until next time.